Good morning, everyone, and thank you for waking up with me on Up with India. Today, I'll be joined by Delaware State Election Commissioner Anthony Albence to discuss what Delawareans can expect in the upcoming general elections. Now, there was a bit of controversy and a whole lot of questions surrounding the primary elections, so we're here today to discuss what you can expect and to make sure that the process in the general elections runs seamlessly. Joining me now on the show, Anthony Albence, how are you?
Hello, good morning. How are you doing?
Good morning. Very happy to have you here. Thank you so much
Yeah,
for taking the time out for this.
sure.
So, I want to get right into things and really get some information out there that people can utilize in the upcoming general election so that they are prepared and they are ready to vote and that their vote matters and it counts.
Sure.
And so, let's talk about the primaries. Let's start there.
Sure.
What were some key steps that your office took to prepare for the primary election?
Sure. Well, the primary election was the first election. Actually, the second election this year, we had a significant amount of mail-in voting. Was the first election where we had vote by mail per se under legislation passed by the General Assembly. So that involved a lot of preparation, a lot of changes from how we normally operate. Not a change in the sense of the polling place locations; those were still operated as usual. But at the same time, we had that very large number of mail-in ballots, either again absentee or vote by mail. Normally, in our elections in Delaware, it's a very small percentage, usually 3 to 4%. For the primary election, we were at about 43% vote by mail and absentee. Presidential primary a little earlier in the year, which at that time was just absentee, that was 45%. So again, you're seeing basically half of your voting being by mail ballots, which is a dramatic increase for us over a very short period of time. So you're kind of, in one respect, operating kind of two elections almost at the same time. One, the full mail operation, and then also the traditional polling place operation. So that was has been a major shift for us through the year.
Yeah, a lot of things have changed, considering the fact that we are in the midst of a global pandemic, and that I'm sure contributed to the reason why the mail-in ballots were at such a higher percentage this year. Talk to me about how you would describe the success of the primary election, or would you call it successful? Were there
Mhm.
things that you felt like could have been better, or do you think that this was it ran as smooth as it could?
Mhm. Well, we were very happy with a lot of the operations overall. We were especially happy with the mail ballots that we were able to process everything and get all the results in on election night, all the unofficial results, which is certainly, I think, an accomplishment given the large shift to mail ballots. And I think that was a major goal that we would accomplish, and we were really happy, about that. And I think people really adapted to voting by mail and using absentee and vote by mail ballots at a greater percentage, certainly than ever before, and certainly vote by mail, really technically the first time in this election. So I think that was a success as well, that people were able to adapt to a new way of voting, or certainly a greater adaption of that type of voting than in the past, certainly.
So were there only those two options for voters this elections were for the primary election season? It was only to be able to mail in and or come in. Was there any other option for voters this election season?
Sure. We do have the option for, under the provisions of absentee voting, we do have in-person absentee voting, and that's a bit more limited currently, just because of the situation, obviously the ongoing situation with COVID, and certainly we know that there is greater hesitation for folks in general for some in-person activities. So, but in-person absentee voting is still an option. So you do have that pre-election day, and basically some of the viewers may be familiar with that from the past. And that's essentially where you would vote your absentee ballot prior to election day, rather than requesting it by mail, like a vote by mail ballot, or an absentee ballot can also be requested by mail, of course. A voter does have that option to come into the elections office. So they could do that. Because of the more limited access to the offices now, because of the COVID precaution, we are asking voters to contact the office just to make an appointment. And the reason we ask that is just to ensure that we can have proper social distancing, safety and sanitation for voters and for staff as well. But that is available in addition to your polling place voting and then your absentee or vote by mail through the traditional US mail. We might, I'm sure we're going to cover this as well, but I also want folks to be aware that for kind of a variation on the absentee and vote by mail process is we do have the secure ballot drop boxes that folks can return their ballot to. Now, of course, a lot of folks watching this program, of course, are in Wilmington. So there is a box in the Newcastle County Elections Office on the 4th floor of Carvel, the state building, also in the lobby of Carvel. And for folks, even you may be city residents, but you may be out and about other parts of Newcastle County, we do have a secure drop box at our warehouse and training center for the Newcastle County office, which is at 220 Lisa Drive. That's in Newcastle. That's near the Harris Corner area, so not far from Newcastle Airport, kind of in the same facility as the large mail facility on Quigley Boulevard, not on the same street, but in the same vicinities. But it's right off of Route 13, and it is signed if you're heading north or southbound on 13. Just look for those signs for the Elections Warehouse, Lisa Drive.
Well, thank you so much for that information, Anthony. I think, of course, a lot of people are going to be able to benefit from that. The reason why I asked you that question, or I honestly started and led with the question about, do you think that this election process was successful? Because in the process of everything happening, there were people that were expressing concerns, had a bunch of questions. There was a lot of information being thrown out into the public, and I think really hard for people to decipher and comb through and understand, like, what does this mean? What does that mean? What actually happened? And one of the questions that arose was that there was an opportunity to vote by email. Was there an actual opportunity to do that, or is that something that never happened?
We do, well, under Delaware law, there is a provision under the provisions of absentee voting that certain voters, whether voters that are sick or temporarily or permanently physically disabled, as well as absentee voters who are in the military or overseas, citizens living overseas, they can take advantage of electronic ballot delivery and return. That's actually been in existence for many years. The military since 2010, and for those sick or physically disabled since 2012. So that involves a process where you can request your ballot to be delivered electronically, particularly for folks that may have a mobility challenge or something of that nature. The tools that we use are compatible with accessibility equipment, which is a real advantage for them to vote independently and privately. Now, when the voters who qualify for that take advantage of that, like as I mentioned, it's delivered electronically, can also be returned. It can be marked electronically and then sent back to us either as an email attachment, and we offer encryption software for that, or voters have other options. They could fax it, and they could also print it out, sign and mail it, and actually place it in the U.S. mail. So I'd always like to emphasize with folks is that's existed for many years, and again, that's under provisions of absentee for those voters who qualify, like I mentioned. And I just want to let folks know that the process is secure. Your privacy is maintained, and also no votes are tabulated online or electronically. So anyone who takes advantage of that option, that ballot that we receive back is reproduced. It is actually because, of course, you're either sending it back to us via email, or if you're printing it, sending it by mail, you're just sending it on plain paper. We actually have, as part of our process, to begin the overall process of preparing the ballots for scanning and tabulation, we actually remake those ballots onto the appropriate ballot paper, the ballot stock. And that happens under bipartisan teams. Everything's handled in a bipartisan, really it's a nonpartisan manner. And that process always produces a paper ballot that is scanned just like any other ballot that comes in by mail. So no votes or anything are tabulated online or electronically. Just want to let folks know that it's a means of delivery and return, but the process of creating the actual ballot that will be scanned, it's all reproduced on a paper ballot, which is auditable and just like any other ballot.
So that process is to ensure that to make sure that someone would not double vote, for instance, voting electronically and then being able to come in and vote as well, right?
Right, yeah. We have that tracking as well. So there's multiple safeguards in place. That's correct. Mm-hmm.
So, other questions that did come up, I want to
Mhm,
really just get this section kind of cleared up, and
mhm,
then we can move
mhm,
on to the general elections.
mhm,
Some other questions that came up were in regards to their voter affiliation, their party being changed when they got to the polling place of where they normally vote. Voters realizing or being told that they could not vote because they are, well, they thought they registered as Republican, but now they are
mhm,
Democrat, or they thought they
mhm,
registered as Democrat, and now it says independent.
mhm,
And now it caused issues. What were
mhm,
some of those issues, and are they going to be resolved in the upcoming general elections to make sure
mhm.
it doesn't happen again?
Sure. Well, and usually those situations we find if there's a situation like that, it's a very isolated situation. We've been using and we work very closely. For example, most of our registrations in Delaware, the vast majority come through our affiliation with the Department of Motor Vehicles. We've been integrated with them for almost 12 years. So that voter, and that's also under federal law, is required for that to be offered at motor vehicle agencies, the opportunity to register, update your registration. So, and we were a leader in that regard in terms of having the connectivity and really getting that information from the DMV in Delaware here in real time. So, what we find is that in instances like that, where there is a question about party affiliation, it's usually a very isolated incident. Just taking into account the fact that we handle so many thousands of transactions that come through the DMV, sometimes in a day. Certainly, on any day, there's many hundreds, if not more. And usually, if there's an individual or isolated situation like that, or very isolated situations, what happens in that case is that the poll workers at the polling place are instructed always to contact the county elections office, so Newcastle County office. And we have very experienced staff who can research those situations. And certainly the first intention is to do everything that we can to honor the voter's intent. If there was some sort of a mistake, perhaps maybe the voter, didn't realize they chose one party affiliation over another. Perhaps they may not have remembered making a party affiliation change, things of that nature. Each situation is handled individually and is reviewed. And the individual directors at the county office, and again, they're bipartisan, a director and deputy director of different political parties, so everything's handled in that nonpartisan manner. They can make decisions and resolve those issues locally without having to go to any additional steps. And they make every effort. I know when I used to be a county director myself in Newcastle County for many years, is that we take into account all of the materials that we have in front of us, look at the records, and try to do our best to resolve things, certainly in the best interest of the voter. And because our goal is really to get them qualified and get them voting in that polling place.
Were there any instances in the primaries that you had to, or your department had to look into? Some voters described it as a glitch in the DMV's system. They described their party affiliation being changed as a glitch. Were there any instances where you had to actually investigate or look into
Mhm,
why this happened, again, to ensure that it does
mhm.
not happen again?
Sure. Yes, there are. In every election, there are some instances like that where situations have to be researched, and there's a variety of reasons that could be. There's no broad or significant, glitch, or that term has been used. The systems that we work with DMV actually work extremely smoothly. And like I said, we actually get transactions real time. So, theoretically, someone goes to the DMV and actually completes a transaction. We see that almost immediately and can process that and try to complete that oftentimes the same day or within the next business day. And folks will get an updated polling place card, for example, to reflect the change. So the system, works really well generally overall. And again, any instances we see are isolated, and they usually can be very easily resolved. And again, those we have working on them are very experienced and very knowledgeable to take care of those sorts of things.
There were some polling places that on the day of the primary election that were changed in some instances for voters where they uh, believed again that their voting place was at this location, and they got there and the doors were closed, locked, not able to get in. uh,
Mhm.
what was the problem with that? If you have any information and can elaborate a little bit more on that, what was the problem with that? Why were people running into that situation?
There have been a couple polling locations in the city. There's been a handful around the state. couple, particularly in Wilmington, where we had the facilities, and again, we're always guests of the facilities, that decided for various reasons related to the COVID situation and circumstances around that, that they did not want to host a polling place. And unfortunately, some of those we found out rather soon before the election. So changes had to be made before the election in a relatively short time frame. Traditionally, what we do in those cases is to update the voters through a variety of means, either sending updated polling place cards to them as one of the primary means, but also updating information on our website, on any of our any social media channels, certainly physically posting notices at a location that's not going to be used. We do not in any way like to change a polling place. We never voluntarily change a polling place in elections. It's always driven by the situation where and location hosting us is going to no longer choose to host us for whatever reason. And again, this situation with COVID, there were a couple of locations where that was the case, which was something that was out of our control. Thankfully, I know at least one of the locations in Wilmington, in Westminster Church, is going to be returning this coming cycle. And I know there's at least one of the locations that was changed in the primary, that was relocated from Hilltop, and that's going to be again housed at Holy Trinity Church for the general. So we'll have that consistency. But again, we very, very rarely change a polling place, and again, it's really never something that we, being elections, chooses on our own. It's usually a situation that's out of our control. We do try to, we know it's inconvenient for folks, and we know it's something we like to avoid because it's certainly a lot of effort on our end as well, in addition to potential inconvenience for the voter. So thankfully, those have been actually relatively very few and far between in light of the COVID situation. I know there's many other states where there's a large number of polling places that have been impacted, many, many more dozens, as opposed to here, where it's been a handful. And we don't like to change any of them. Thankfully, it's been very small, and that situation seems to have stabilized now.
With everything going on in the world right now, considering again the pandemic that's happening, you did talk a lot about things that you traditionally would do in terms of if everything was running normally and at speed, what we would normally do. Now, in these instances where things are completely different, we're living in a totally new world, how can voters now prepare for these changes that may come up that you may not be able to notify them in advance, so that they're not discouraged to get to the polls to vote, because I think that's what is happening, right? And so people are looking at instances that they've been in, which you would identify as isolated instances that they've been in, and they're saying, you know what, I don't even want to vote anymore because I don't think that my vote matters, or I don't think that my vote is going to be counted, or whatsoever. So how can people, whether or not you get the information to them in time or not, how can they be still encouraged to get out and vote, and have the information necessary that they need to, whether it's go to a different polling place and know where that is and prepare for these things?
Sure. We always encourage voters, probably the best tool that we have, the central location for information for voters, is iVote, which is the voter portal, ivote.de.gov. That's really a one-stop shop that has all sorts of information, whether that be your polling place location, a sample ballot. You can view an update. You can register to vote on there. If you're not registered, you can check your registration status. If you are registered, again, view that information that I mentioned, such as polling place, view a sample ballot. You can, in fact, request an absentee or vote by mail ballot there, and then subsequently check the ballot status. So the ivote.de.gov is probably the best tool in terms of a one-stop shop. Check that out. Check the elections websites. In Newcastle, it's electionsnc.delaware.gov. Tons of information there. And I encourage folks, even outside of election season, certainly iVote's a quick stop, but check the elections website out for the Newcastle County office, which services Wilmington. You can find a host of information, whether it be maps of the various districts, other information that the voter may find interesting, information about election laws, just registration information if they'd like to assist someone else in registering to vote. And certainly contact the office if you ever have a question. There's contact links on the website, email, phone numbers, things of that nature. Don't hesitate to reach out, ask a question, inquire. That's always encouraged and welcome. We have plenty of great people to help.
And I think it's important, again, for us to be here and for you to answer a lot of these questions, Anthony, because
Mhm.
transparency, I think for me, is the best
Mhm.
tool that can be used at this
Yep.
time when people
Right.
are, under the impression that again that their vote may not count, that it does not matter. And
Mhm.
as we both know, voter suppression is a real problem, and in other states that has been a problem.
Mhm.
And the
Sure.
pandemic and voters polling sites being changed and all of these things, one could only think that they are being stopped from being able to cast their actual vote.
Mhm.
And so again, I think that it's important for us to be transparent. I do want to move forward in asking some questions on how the department plans to ensure that there is no instances of voter suppression. Considering the fact that voter suppression is typically used to stop minorities from being able to vote, or has been in the past and in history. How are we going to ensure that in this state, the first state, Wilmington, Delaware, where the Black population is the highest, how are we
Mhm.
going to ensure that those voters, those minority voters, will not be suppressed in this upcoming election?
Mhm. Well, our goal is always to encourage as many people as possible to register and to vote. And so we continue to again provide as much information out there as I mentioned that's available. We also really try to make voter registration easy, voter registration updates easy here with our online voter registration tool, iVote, which also includes that tool as well as the registration, as well as the voter lookup and voter information abilities as well. And we basically try to put as much information out there and make voters as aware as they can be. And again, things as easy as going online and viewing your sample ballot, before before you go to vote. Know who's on your ballot, know who the candidates are. We have candidate contact information on our website. Any candidates who have filed with us that are on the ballot, for example, all of their information is online. Anything they provided to us as public information, including websites, phone numbers, that's available if someone wishes to reach out to a candidate directly. And again, as I mentioned before, any question that folks have, we are very accessible in our department. We want to answer any questions. And I think it's very important to remember, we're fortunate here in Delaware, even though certainly like everywhere, of course, we have folks of different political parties, different political orientations, is that Delaware is very fortunate in that we have an overriding, approach and focus, and this comes from our General Assembly, folks, members of both parties, that I have found over the years in working with members of both parties in our General Assembly that make the laws that govern elections in Delaware, they share that focus for wanting to empower voters, include voters, and we are fortunately not afflicted by some of those very challenging, partisan kind of conflicts in other states that impact voting and elections. Whether you're Democrat, Republican, whatever party you are here in Delaware, I found that all of our policymakers share that commitment to encouraging people to vote, wanting people to vote, wanting people to participate. So I just think we're very fortunate in that regard, and I found that certainly to be my experience in working with everyone in state government who impacts voting laws and voting policies.
What was your biggest takeaway from the election season thus far?
I just think there's a lot of interest. I think people are very engaged. People are very committed, and it's great to see. And people are taking initiative and using the choices that are available out there, whether that be voting in person or voting via mail, whether that be absentee or vote by mail. And I've just seen that people are very enthusiastic and engaged, and we're just very happy that we're able, through some of the options that are available to us now, to meet those needs in more ways than we have in the past. with some of the new additions out there, such as vote by mail. We're just happy that we can do that. So, but people are engaged and enthusiastic, and that's what is very encouraging for us, certainly, to see as well.
Now, Delaware does not have in-person early voting. I know, again, we're getting ready to go
Absolutely.
to general elections. Why is that? I had a question.
Well, Delaware, it's not part of Delaware's law right now. It will be enacted in law. It actually is already enacted in law to become effective in 2022. So starting in 2022, the next election season, Delaware will have 10 days of early voting preceding primary and general elections. And that will conclude on the Sunday immediately before Election Day. So that'll be in place. And there'll be at least, excuse me, one location in each county and one in the city of Wilmington. So that'll be something to keep an eye out for 2022. That'll be coming online.
Awesome. So I feel like I
Mhm,
got the inside scoop to that, and I'll
mhm.
add that to my
There you go. There you go.
so there are opportunities for people to register to vote, and I've seen different sites around the city. What are some key sites that people can go to make sure that they are registered and prepared?
Sure. Just again, go back to ivote.de.gov to register there or to check your registration status. We also have options if you go to our websites, elections.delaware.gov. We also have electionsncc.delaware.gov, which is the Newcastle County office, of course, which services Wilmington voters as well in particular. There are options. You can certainly download a form if you wish to print out or fill out a physical form. That option as well. And that's what I would encourage. Again, circling back to iVote. I want to certainly remind folks that October 10th coming up is the voter registration deadline for the general election. So not 100% sure when this will air, but if this is before October 10th, certainly registration by that deadline. That's for folks who aren't registered already. If you are registered, there's no need to re-register. We just encourage you again to use iVote or a paper form if you wish. Just make sure you've updated your address with us. We want to make sure that you have the correct information and we have your correct address. That certainly facilitates things on election day if you're voting in person. Prevents any inconvenience to you as well.
And what is the most important message that you want to leave voters with preparing for this general election?
Most importantly, I would say just again, make sure you're registered. If you are registered already, check your registration status, make sure it's updated. If you're going to decide to vote by mail or absentee ballot, again, go to iVote or visit our website to obtain a vote by mail application. If you did not receive one in the mail, everyone received one in the mail who had not already requested an absentee or vote by mail ballot. So again, if you're going to avail yourself of that option, do so early, request the ballot early as soon as you get it, return it as soon as possible, either by mail or utilize one of the drop boxes.
And what would you say to voters that are discouraged to vote, that probably plan on not voting in this election?
Sure. We encourage every vote counts. I mean, that's not a cliche, it's true. And we encourage everyone to be involved with the process. It's your right, and we want everyone to take advantage of that right. And we want to try to make it as easy and convenient as possible. And again, just don't give up that crucial and that essential right that you have to be part of the process.
Thank you so much, Mr. Albence, for joining me.
Thank you.
And thank you to all of you for watching. I hope that helped to answer some of your questions surrounding the general elections. I encourage everyone to get out there and vote, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow on Up with India.